Hello and welcome to the Crux of MedTech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward, because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in MedTech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the Crux of MedTech. So Manios, welcome to the podcast in person.
Thanks Andrew, for having me. I have to say, this looks really nice. I wouldn't say compared to what you've done so far, because it was already nice, but yeah, this feels much more real, you know?
Exactly, and I'm so glad you could be the first one to join me, because we've known each other for a little while now. We've been waiting a long time to do this podcast, and couldn't think of a better person to do it.
No, likewise, and I'm honored to be the first one. Very excited to have the discussion.
Awesome. So, for the audience, why don't you tell us who Manios is and a bit about what you do?
I'm Manios Dimitrakakis. I'm the CEO at Panda Surgical, where we're introducing handheld dexterous robots for minimally invasive neurosurgery.
Amazing. So, as I said, I've known you for a little while now. When we first met, I came across to a little lab over in Hackney, where there was a surgical robot from a very famous provider in the corner that had been torn apart and been worked on. But why don't you tell me how Panda Surgical actually came about? How did you get into this business? And
quick disclaimer: torn apart for research purposes by UCL. So we are in a very different, distinct thing what we do. And that lab you came to, we're still in the same lab. We have this sort of running jokes about we could fit as many people needed. It's not really true. If the team hears this, they're going to be slightly annoyed. But yeah, we're still there. We're very glad to have that space. I came to London in 2018 to do, I came in for an internship at UCL, but then shortly thereafter I stayed for a PhD, and I've been in that same lab for 6 years now, and 7, time flies. And when I started doing my PhD, we wanted to do robotics for neurosurgery. At the end of that journey, we found private investment interest, and I'm sure we're going to get to the whole how this shaped. So it made sense to spin out into Panda Surgical from UCL, and this is what we've been doing since then. We've been incubated in the Hearist UCL space, which is where you came in Hackney Week. And I have to say, it's in East London, the nicer part of London. So it's a good spot to be in.
Well, you must be getting dizzy coming over to the southwest for this.
It's nice. It's nice. It's really nice.
Very good. So where did your, passion for medtech come from? When did you know you wanted to be in medical, and what was the turning point for you?
I'd say very early on. So I originally wanted to become a doctor, and now I see this is a very common story in the field. Engineers wanted to become doctors. My mother is a special ed teacher, and from a very early age, it was clear to both my siblings and I how a single person can have very positive impact on someone's life. Seeing my mom's students and how they became better by when people actually cared. So when I was probably 14, 15, I wanted to, this drive was born in me to help. And being a doctor, a medical doctor, is one of the ways to do that. Now in Greece, I'm from Greece, if the British accent didn't give it away, we have this system where at 17, 18, you have this big exam and you can choose which school you go to. So I missed medicine for literally an answer in an exam. And there's this urban legend that I knew the answer and I just by stress filled in the wrong one. This is probably not true. But yeah, so I then did the next natural thing people do when they want to become doctors. Electrical engineering. This is what my brother was studying, so I knew, through him, I knew the school, and I felt it would be a good idea because you could then follow on with biomedical, or there are tons of options actually. So I went and did that, and in Greece we have this programs which is 5 years, and it's an integrated Masters of Engineering, MEng, and 5 years is debatable, but I went and did that, majored in systems and control, and this was a joint electrical engineering and computer science degree as well. So through that 5 years, I then came to London, to do that internship in robotic surgery. I really loved robotic surgery because it combined that high tech with actually having an impact on patients' lives. So when my PhD at UCL, when my internship at UCL was sort of wrapping up, we had this chance to build on something new through the PhD, and it was a no-brainer ever since.
Amazing. And that internship, what did you do on that internship? How was it in robotic surgery? Were you working with a company, or was it just within UCL?
That was just that was through UCL. My master's thesis in Greece, that was in robotic surgery. We built this. I'm saying miniature now, but at Panda we do 3 millimeters. This was like 15. At the scale was massive, and that was for cardiac surgery, and it was based on control. But I manufactured the robot as well. So I had never done really design or anything like that prior, and I found that I really liked that. So I came to London and I did a similar project, but on nephrectomy, and that was actually with the Da Vinci back then. This was 2018. Through UCL, and that was an Erasmus placement. So I think a program that still exists for the UK, where some of your expenses are covered by the European Union, and that was a great chance to come and see London, see if that was my first time abroad as well, to live abroad, see if I liked the experience, and it was a very nice way to progress to that PhD.
Nice. And I'm not sure why you chose London compared to Greece and the hot weather that you guys experience over there, because it's a pretty miserable day over here. But in that PhD, what was it then that, I guess, because this obviously spun out of your PhD, what was it, what was the time when you decided to launch a company out of the work you were doing in academia? That's
a great question, and I think I can't really pinpoint it to that was the day. It was a progression, as I've said prior. And it is always circumstances, isn't it? When I joined in London, it just so happened that my clinical supervisor, when I joined UCL, also joined UCL. He's a practicing neurosurgeon, Mr. Hani Marcus. But at the time, he was looking for his first PhD student. So I was here maybe a month, maybe a couple months, trying to find my project. And that was originally an MRI neurosurgical robot. I really like MRI, still do. But then we had this meeting in a room smaller than this. Not that this is small, but just to give you the idea. And I had Hani drawing on a piece of paper the challenge that was specifically for skull-based surgery. And me at that point, 2 months into the PhD, I was acting like, oh yeah, we can certainly solve that. It's going to take us 1.5 years. Took more. So we really hit it off. And then with my technical supervisor, Dostoyanov, he's a UCL professor. So we had the resources to work on an applicable problem that would have a direct solution to something that patients suffer with. So that was the sell for me. It was immediate that this is what I want to do. And we built a handheld robotic device specifically for skull-based surgery. That was my PhD. We thought, and we still do, we strongly believe that we have a solution that can have an impact. So towards the end of my 3rd year of PhD, I did 4 in the end, we wanted to take this to patients. And there's plenty of ways. One is to do a fellowship, get a grant to stay in research. And this is a very attractive way as well, by the way. It would probably take a bit more time than spinning out. So concurrently, we were also looking for ways to accelerate. And spinning out was one of those ways. So it wasn't that we were set, this has to be a company, but when we're thinking about how we can get this to patients as soon as possible, a company makes sense.
Yeah. And did you always know that you wanted to get into entrepreneurship, or is it literally just the stars aligning, moving from PhD to a company?
I wanted to. Not necessarily straight after the PhD. I always thought that you need to build that experience first. But the best way to build the experience is by doing the thing. So when the chance came, I knew I would just jump head in. But yeah, while I knew I wanted to do this, it wasn't that, okay, I have this plan, I'm going to finish the PhD, and then let's jump straight to it.
Okay. So let's move into Panda and the products you guys are building then. So what is the clinical problem that Panda Surgical solves?
if we summarize it, is we're essentially enhancing the surgeon's capabilities when they run out of solutions. We're talking about in brain surgery and neurosurgery generally, which would include brain and spine. Surgeons need to get to incredibly tight pockets inside the anatomy. And back in the day, they would open the patient open, which is fairly effective, but incredibly dangerous as well. In some instances, 1 in 2 patients would die. And even in the cases where it worked well, it would still have a lot of complications, a lot of side effects. So, and the first neurosurgery actually was done here in London, in Queen Square, where we collaborate with. But in the 90s, they introduced these minimally invasive approaches, and this is natural because it was how are we taking knowledge we've learned from other disciplines, say laparoscopy, introduce it to this very tough approach. And they gained access to the brain by small orifices, which could be natural orifices, the nose, the ears, the eyes, or tiny artificial incisions, and this could be done both on the spine and on the head. So surgeons now can get to the anatomy, and in the 90s it was very fluffy. It was a difficult operation, still is. And since then, imaging has drastically improved, navigation has drastically improved. We know a lot more about the abnormality inside the head, but when we get there, we are still very, very limited by our movements. And you can imagine, some surgeons have compared this to trying to operate inside a matchbox with chopsticks by being constrained by a pipe of 2 centimeters in diameter. So this is a strong visual to understand how tough this could be. And now if you imagine that bad, you go a tiny bit to the left and now the patient's blind, this creates troubles. So we think that using robotics in this is a natural enhancement that surgeons can take, again, that knowledge from the other disciplines that haven't been applied to brain surgery and do that. And we think that the problem is very, very pressing because to us it's mind-boggling, pun intended, that almost every other discipline has these newer, fancier tools, but the brain, the most important organ, depending on who you ask, of the body, does not. So we're here to solve this problem.
So why do you think since brain surgery has kind of come about, why do you think the tooling hasn't really improved up until this point?
Well, I have a lot of opinions on this, and I'm sure people will disagree with some. The first robotic surgery was done for brain, and it was needle and navigation, and we still have a bunch of robots for biopsies, DBS, navigation, stereotactic surgery. But when it comes to actual tissue manipulation, to remove tumors, to treat stroke, aneurysms, I think it was a very, very difficult problem. The spaces are very tight. The control interfaces can't be those teleop interfaces because you need to be there to change tools to a surgery would, a minimally invasive endoscopic brain surgery will change tools maybe 40 times. So imagine having this large teleop or these stereotactics. So I think it was just a very difficult technical challenge. On top of that, you have a smaller market. So brain surgery, neurosurgery as a segment is one of the larger surgical segments, but it doesn't compare to, say, again, laparoscopy, which includes a number of different specific procedures. So we thought that it's most likely that the effort to solve this incredibly difficult technical challenge wouldn't justify the means. This is why we were able to innovate, and that was part of my PhD as well, to come up with very cost-effective ways to enhance this problem by also learning by all these different things people have done throughout the years. Some have worked, some haven't. So we have all of this breadth and knowledge on top of which we can innovate, and I think that was what was missing from brain surgery.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
Okay, so let's dive into the approach you guys have taken. It's handheld robotic instrumentation. Like, obviously, a lot of people, when they think about robots, is big, multi-arm, complex, super complex systems. And it's not that your product isn't complex, but it's a more simple approach than some of those other manufacturers have taken. So why do you think that the approach you took was the approach that you took? And tell us a little bit more, describe the technology and how it works.
We took this approach because we tried the big teleop during my co-founders PhDs, my clinical co-founders PhD. They built a miniature Da Vinci, to put it simply, and they got it to the point of animal trials. So it was quite progressed. And to me, as an engineer, it looks incredible. I think that work was really, really good technically. But when they then put down the economics of it to commercialize this system, it would be such an expensive endeavor that doesn't necessarily outweigh the positive outcomes. When they did that animal study, there was improved outcome, but surgeons had mixed opinions. So we started with that foundation. We already knew or had a very good idea of what wouldn't work. When I joined, I also wanted to do a teleop, because that's the robots we know. Yeah. But I feel that when nothing exists in a field, there's probably reason in a field. Sorry, when nothing exists in a field where similar problems have been solved in other disciplines, there's probably a reason. So we looked at the problem outside the box, and we thought, okay, what have other people done, and why didn't it work? And we think it's, again, the economics, the ergonomics, and the operative workflow. So with that in mind, we thought a handheld device would make sense. We then went and built it for the PhD. And again, that was specifically for skull base. But skull base shares a lot of the intricacies endoscopic or minimally invasive neurosurgery generally has. So we got a lot of these answers, a lot of these questions answered. And at that point of spinning out, we knew exactly what we had to make a viable business. This is why now at Panda Surgical, we've made these miniature handheld devices. And you can imagine you have a handheld controller, ergonomically designed, very, very lightweight, less than half a kilo. The full system is less than half a kilo. And on this handheld controller, you can connect interchangeable wristed instruments with tiny miniature diameters at only 3 millimeters. And this could be forceps, dissectors, suction tips. And you can penetrate tissue deep within the brain and spine and perform previously impossible delicate maneuvers to manipulate tissue. And again, this could be for brain, aneurysms, stroke, discs. And on top of that, and because of our expertise, we've built strong software assistance too, that again takes advantage of this robotic capability to come up with strong decision support tools to make these operations even safer, even more effective.
Absolutely, and it's really user-friendly. Like, obviously, I've come along and tried it out, and it's very easy for me to pick up, and it's very intuitive for the neurosurgeons who are using tooling that feels very similar in terms of the way that they're going about it. They're not having to completely relearn the way that they do neurosurgery. So what is the reaction of neurosurgeons when they get this in their hands? How do they react, and what's some of the feedback been?
First of all, I appreciate you find this easy to learn, because we have spent a minute and a half trying to make it ergonomic, trying to make it in instinctive, natural way to use it. We did a preclinical study, and I won't go into the details on how this study came about, but it was a stressful period. We did a comparator study between standard instruments and our devices, and we found that after 10-15 minutes of use, surgeons had essentially picked up the device. They knew how to use it. And for complex tasks such as simulated tumor removal. And the reason I mentioned this was an effort is because that was, we entirely overshot on the deadline. So the day before the lab, we had no idea if the actual tech would work. Turns out it did. Everyone was very happy. But since then, and from the very beginning of this startup, we've interacted with now almost 70 neurosurgeons from all around the world, in the US, in Europe, the UK, obviously, China, even Singapore we've spoken with, and the vast majority of the neurosurgeons have shown great interest in the device. They support the premise. Some neurosurgeons, in fair game, they've said, we want to try it first. But we've also had 50 neurosurgeons try the device, hands-on experience. 95% said they would use this in the clinical practice. So now, while this is very important and very supportive feedback to what we do, we need to build more. So we keep having labs, we keep bringing surgeons in, we travel to neurosurgeons to do cadaver labs, phantoms, just demonstrations, because we strongly believe that without this feedback, you're sort of left in this space where you're not exactly sure of what you're building.
Yeah. And in that preclinical phase, was there anything that surprised you or you learned that you weren't expecting to learn?
Oh, well, that's the great thing, though. You've no idea what you don't know, you know? Yeah. You learn as you go. Absolutely. I'm known in the team of being not really dismissive of ideas, but I have my strong opinions, you know? I will leave to the person to build the idea before dismissing it. But in my head, I'm like, this will never work, but let's see. And I've been wrong so many times, so many times. To give you an example, we have this rotating joystick that's a part of the ergonomic proposition. I can share because it was recently granted. And essentially, you can rotate the joystick of the controller so that it's both hand size agnostic, but also right and left-handed use. So we think it's a neat ergonomic feature. And I had my tech lead from very, very early on telling me how this whole body should be rotating. And I thought, nah, this is going to look silly. We're going to have just a joystick component. And this was the case. We did probably 3 or 4 cadaver labs like that. But then we changed it, and it was so much better, to the point where I tried to make this like this was my idea from early. It was just an example.
Very good, very good. So when it comes to building up to a preclinical, especially when this has been PhD work and then early stage R&D, like what are the things you needed to do to prep for that preclinical, and like how did you make sure that the preclinical went as smoothly as possible?
So technically we're still in the preclinical phase. We're just now preparing for in-human, hopefully to do it very, very soon. We did our live animals recently. And I think that the major thing was that changing your mindset from that academic mindset to we now need to build a product. Because in academia, you're constantly looking for this novel thing that could be the game changer, the disruptor. As a product, you assume, or you must assume, you already have that, and you need to make it viable, economically viable, and also robust enough. So I think to us, that was the main challenge, because the core team, the first 4 people hired, including myself, we were all from the same lab doing the same PhDs in the same group. So my fear and my advisor's fear was that, oh, this is going to take too long. The caveat to that is that we overshot. So by fearing this would take too long, we took some shortcuts that didn't necessarily pan out. For example, I still remember this. This was a cadaver lab. We had booked this lab here in North London, and we would introduce one new feature. So 4 weeks before the lab, because labs normally we do them every couple months, so half the time in the lab, we thought, you know what, we have 4 weeks, let's introduce all the new features. Literally all of the features we wanted to introduce, we introduced. And it turned out that the day before, not a single feature actually worked. So we had to patch things up, and the lab itself, it wasn't a good lab. But what we've learned from that lab was incredibly valuable. So I'm saying we overshot. In the end, I think trying to have this accelerated way is beneficial, is useful, but you could fall into traps that taking a more careful approach probably wouldn't. And a good serve from that lab is before big labs, cadavers or the animal recently, will go to this chicken place by the lab. Okay. It's sort of a tradition we have in the team. But that time we were really busy. So instead of chicken, we did Subways and delivered in the lab.
Okay.
So since then, we've banned Subways as a means of...
Yeah. Keep on going to that chicken shop and
Yeah.
successful labs.
That's my advice to anyone in the field.
So you guys have moved incredibly quickly so far and also stayed really capital efficient while you've done it. How have you managed that balance between trying to move fast and making smart investments with also making sure that you can move quickly?
First of all, thanks so much for mentioning that. We do believe that's the case. Obviously, we are in a field of incredibly talented people and startups and competitors. So pace is something that we aspire. It's really important to us. But of course, you'll have very good examples throughout. In terms of our lean mindset, our efficiency, I think this is a testament to the team first and foremost. We have incredibly hard-working people, very smart and talented people. None of us in the core team has done this before, but we are very, very good at receiving advice, filtering advice, and making mostly the right decisions. We will obviously do wrong decisions as well. Team, again, is, to me, that's the main reason. Then we have the advice we're receiving. We are well connected through my co-founders, through our investors. Our investors, Prima Nova Technologies, they're a startup themselves. They do neuromodulation, and they have all this knowledge that we, especially in the beginning, could tap into, and it was really, really important to get us going. We have our advisors, and the advice we're receiving both in tech and business has been able to help us accelerate. And finally, the university as well. The fact that we can have capability in-house is a game changer. And we specifically are located in the Harris campus. And the Harris campus is, maybe you know of it, it was built specifically for the Olympics, the London Olympics, and it was really well taken advantage of afterwards as well. So it's now this huge campus with other companies. Within the UCL campus specifically, we have access to our workshop with full-time staff. So it's been very, very easy for us to go and test quick ideas, then take them to the lab or the hospital for preclinicals through our hospital network. And then while a prototype would normally for brain surgery would take a very large amount of time to test, we can minimize that time.
Very good. And moving from academia into more of an industrial company, how have you managed that transition, especially with people who are all really academics? Like how have you taken the guys on that journey with you, and how have you moved from that academic mindset into building out the company?
I think the academic mindset is quite useful because we have this knack for filtering information. Through the PhD, you really learn what is valuable. In the beginning, you're very bad at it, but by the end of it, you can know which information can lead to something, and you're often wrong, but most of the times you're not. So I think that was a good thing to get from the PhD. Then moving forward, it was the advice that we're receiving. We're trying to speak with experienced people all the time, and those people are advisors. They're also the FDA or the MHRA here in the UK, our consultants. When we don't know something, we're very clear that we don't, and we seek for what is the best solution and then decide. So for us, it was a very natural transition. I don't think we had too much trouble for staying trapped in this, I need to publish and I need to keep iterating until the perfect thing. We have a good enough strategy, and this has been very beneficial. We still publish because I do think it's very important to have this peer review at every level, but it's mostly on clinical journals for all of our cadaver and animal labs.
Okay, and what do you think one of the, or some of the biggest mistakes you've made in this journey so far, that if you were going to repeat the journey getting to here, you would do differently in the future?
You have an hour and a half. I think, well, to be honest, we've been here for a couple of years now, so the list isn't too long. I'm sure that in 2 years' time it will be. Something that we probably could have done better is how we treated quality. And not necessarily that we didn't look too much into it, but we thought it was a different problem than the problem we were solving. In the beginning, we thought that you have to be, that when you document something, there's no really space for improvements or space for to do things better. And that was mostly because of inexperience. Now we have a quality engineer in-house. Of course, we have external support, and I'm very proud of our quality system. I do think this could have been done a bit better. And then on the other hand, it's all of these rushed experiments we did, but I can't necessarily say these were a mistake, because in the end, we've learned so many things out of those labs that I'm sure that it did work out. Another item, probably the last one, would be how we integrated that surgeon feedback in the beginning. We had surgeons iterating the same idea, but because we had, say, we've done a literature search before, and that was probably where the academic mindset crept in, we felt that either we know better or we should test first. And we tested first, turns out we were wrong. That was on some ergonomic features. But again, this probably, we wasted a couple months on it, so it wasn't the end of the world. But all these tiny errors in judgment sort of creep up in the end, but you have to be adaptive, you have to be very quick to interact, and I think we've been doing that.
Okay, so where are you guys at today? What's on the horizon for you guys? What stage are you up to?
I think we're at an incredibly interesting, exciting stage right now. We've just wrapped up our animal labs, and in this one we tried, again, that mindset of going all in. We tried 5 different approaches. We hadn't tried a single one of those approaches before, but we wanted to build an expansive portfolio of usage of our device. In 2 sheep models, no adverse or technical or clinical events. Incredibly happy with that, how that study went. And building on top of that, we now know we have a safe device, because we had no events, but we need to prove its clinical use case right now. And we have done this on the preclinical stage, but of course we need to do it in human. So our next major milestone is doing that first in human study. And this is why we're raising, one of the reasons we're raising our Series A as well. Human studies are traditionally expensive. So we will do this here in London. It will be a small scale, but we think having collected that clinical data, then we have enough to freeze that stage, that preclinical stage / clinical, build that commercial system and take it for approval.
Excellent. And what's your route to market? Are you going down the US route first, or looking at other international?
We have to go US first right now. This is the make it or break it. We have already spoken with the FDA. We have very good, clear plans of what we need to do. We have a shortened pathway compared to different robotic surgery devices and companies. But we are also tackling the UK, Europe. We are a European company, so we really want to help the systems here. A good caveat with what we do is that we can be cheap enough for both systems, and we've tested with neurosurgeons. No one's really raised an eye on our pricing models. So we have this two-phased approach. We are also tackling APAC with our investors, Prima Nova. But generally, we have this worldwide scope, which we think we can offer a real solution to agnostic systems. It doesn't matter if it's in the US, in the UK, in Asia. We all share, when it comes to confined space surgery, neurosurgery, we all share the same problem. So while the US will come first, we are aiming for a globalized approach.
Yeah, and that's the route most companies are going down, is go to the US first because of all the challenges of not going down that way at the moment. So what's the long-term vision for Panda? Where do you see this going? What do you think, the future holds for you guys?
We believe we solve a very important problem. And when we reach the stage of clinical use, we have good indication to believe that the uptake will be very, very positive, and there is the receipt from neurosurgeons. So our goal is to have as many neurosurgeons use our devices and as many patients benefit from it. So we truly believe we have what it takes to grow to that scale. And of course, we can discuss about exit strategies, IPOs, what is the best way to get to patient. We're open to any different pathways, but our goal is truly, and that would be a disservice to my neurosurgeon co-founder if it wasn't, to have as many patients improve their outcomes and the quality of life from using our devices. Because even when these operations are successful in the eyes of the neurosurgeon, the patient's life can be very, very impacted. We have vision issues, we have hormone problems. The quality of life can drastically be affected, and this is something you don't normally see when you stop the operation. This is something we learned through our public and patient involvement and engagement projects, that when we speak with patients, in our mind is, oh, you've had the surgery, the tumor is almost removed, you're good to go. No, the tumor could come back, or you could have complications, readmissions, repeat procedures, and these are things that you don't necessarily see directly in the data. And we do believe we can make this better, we can reduce those complications and overall improve patients' lives.
Is there a particular patient story that stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that actually we learned of this in one of the patient advisory groups we did recently. And these are financed by the NHR, by the way. We're incredibly grateful to them for the support. There was this patient that had an adenoma, and those type of tumors, they're not hugely dangerous, but they could really affect your quality of life. So that patient had lost their sight prior to the operation, or almost lost their sight. And after the operation, most of the tumor was removed. You couldn't necessarily see that something was pressing on the optic nerve. So everyone was very excited from the operation. Turns out that the patient's eyesight hadn't completely recovered, and to a point where psychologically the patient wasn't really feeling too well. And you can imagine, you go with some expectations. Obviously, having some eyesight instead of none is really, it's incredible, but you can't necessarily appreciate how the patient feels. So hearing that story, it really drove us that we know for a fact that with a robotic device, you could have a better outcome. So that patient would not only see better, but feel better and be a better contributor to society by having all of their skills come back in their workplace, with family time, everything. So these are the stories that really drive us to have an impact, to make a case. Same with people that have tumors on their spine, and they can get their ability to walk back, but with the current endoscopic techniques, it's incredibly difficult. And of course, I'm not going to make those major claims yet, because we do need that clinical data. But as a vision, as a belief, this really drives us. We do want to make neurosurgery more efficient, more effective, and safer.
Another quick interruption to tell you about our sponsors, KUKA. KUKA is a global leader in robotics with over 25 years of experience partnering with medtech companies on their journey to market. Their reputation is built on robust technology, reliability, and long-term collaboration. More than a supplier, KUKA provides trusted support throughout the product lifecycle, from development to integration and beyond. For companies exploring robotic solutions, the KUKA LBR Med offers a ready-to-integrate, state-of-the-art option that meets the highest medical standards, without the need to build from scratch. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes and follow the link to KUKA's website.
So what are the next things that you need to get into the patients, and what do you need to do next as a business?
To get the patient for the first time, we're almost there. We need to wrap up our verification testing, which we are currently undergoing, and get that MHRA approval for that first clinical study. To get to the patients on a wider scale, we need to take that first in-human prototype, transfer it into a commercial product, and we are feature complete. We know exactly what we need to do. We just running this clinical trial as the last tick of the checklist. to know that this is exactly the product we need to make. That commercial product will be tested for FDA approval for CE marking, and at that point we will be able and ready to launch a limited commercial release. For that limited release, we are going to fine-tune, and this will be with selected partners, mostly in the US. We will fine-tune the final details of the commercial model and finally release worldwide. This is our plan.
Excellent. Are you having conversations with the strategics yet?
You have to. I think it doesn't matter how early you are. If there's interest from strategics, you should engage in those conversations because you build a relationship. And we think the good thing with us is that we've identified a major gap into what the strategics do. And we now see that the strategics themselves have identified the same gap. It's just that a technology doesn't hugely exist at the moment. So very early discussions, of course, is mostly to get to know each other. But yeah, I think you'd be in a disadvantage if you didn't start these conversations as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And I guess with Panda's product, the challenge with a lot of the robotics companies when they do get acquired is actually integrating that into a big kind of slow-moving company that doesn't really know how to sell capital or sell robotics. Whereas with your solution, it's not 20 degrees outside of what they're already doing. It's kind of just the next evolution of the products that they're already selling. So I can see how that would be super interesting to a lot of these big strategics. So in these conversations, like, how are they helping guide the company and guide what you guys are doing from a development perspective?
We've had very varied interactions. This is a very good question that I myself haven't really put down in writing, right? So I'll do this immediately after. We've had very different, not different, we had a breadth of interactions. So I found that pretty much everyone, including investors, fellow entrepreneurs, everyone's really happy to help or provide feedback, chime in with their opinions. So strategics have been very, very good at testing our pricing models, obviously, because they've been doing this before. So getting feedback on our pricing is has been really helpful. But then they do have their preconceptions on what it takes to bring a product into market. So we feel that sometimes we have to re-educate investors and strategics onto there's a shorter way. And if we take this and that example that we're following, we can get there sooner. An example is, of course, the animal trials. We did animals 19 months after receiving our first investment, which to me, for a brain surgery device, I haven't found a comparator yet. Maybe there exists, but in the case of robotics for neurosurgery, things normally are much slower. So this is, again, a testament to we really like what we do, we believe what we do, and we're not afraid to showcase that to whomever we speak with. But generally, I have to say that we've been getting a lot of advice for free, if you will. If you have an honest discussion, I think it's really helpful to have an open chat.
Exactly. And you guys are going on the fundraising journey at the minute, raising your Series A.
That's right.
If we're allowed to share that, of course. Raising your Series A. How have you found the conversations have gone with investors at the moment? It's a tough market out there with signs of improving, but how have the conversations been received with the investment community?
I have to say I'm quite optimistic for what we do. Obviously, it's a long process, and it becomes longer and longer with it feels like when you start the discussions, they purposely take long. I'm sure lots of people can relate, but I'm quite optimistic. I think what we've seen with investors is that they realize our problem is important, but sometimes they don't have the expertise or the appetite or the thesis to support, which is very natural. But the people that we are in deeper discussions with, they're very supportive, they're very happy to help. And I think these are the investors you want to have, because obviously money is king. You need the money. Without it, you can't really progress. But having that extra layer of help from your investor, as we did with Primanova, this is very helpful. And to tie us nicely back to the previous discussion on what we did wrong, quality, when we realized that we were probably tackling it on the wrong, and that was before the quality engineer joined, the first thing we did is we went back to Primanova and we're like, look, you are a medical device company. You can't not have a QMS. What are we doing wrong? And obviously they don't have all the answers because it's very product specific and process specific mostly, but that was really helpful. So it will come a point where you can't be too selective with your investors, but if you are, and we hope we will be, we think it can be very, very beneficial to get the right people in.
Absolutely, and we've obviously spoken about some of the people that are interested in this round, so there's definitely interest from the investment community in what you guys are doing. So I think it's worth talking about some of the other parts of the platform, and AI is a topic on a lot of people's minds at the moment. So AI is kind of part of the product of the future, but how might AI impact the Panda toolkit, and how might AI integrate?
If you've seen me, if anyone's seen me in any panels, I apologize because I do repeat the same sentiment every single time. AI needs to be useful. If AI isn't useful, then it becomes a burden on your pricing, on your model, and on how people will perceive what you do. So for us, this is again where our pre-existing research was really helpful. Through many, many years, both my co-founders and people from the team have done tons of AI research to find these products that are useful. And in our case, we've narrowed it down to 3 things. One is safeguarding, to be able to suggest to the surgeon when they're using the tool in an unsafe manner, key insights and metrics, and I think this is the one. And finally, decision support, and this would be in the sense of critical anatomies, don't go there. This could be the optic nerve, stuff like that, or in spine, try to avoid this little nerve. But by shaping that with the robot, we think here is the game changer, because all these products could be standalone, but we would be foolish to not take advantage of our robotics data, because our robot generates tons and tons of data in kinematics, sensory, visual data. So by combining those tranches with the pre-existing video feed, we can have even stronger insights, even stronger decision support. And this is exactly where we're aiming at, where we're going to give the surgeon a tool they can expand their capabilities with, but on top of that, increase safety.
Amazing. And so I want to bring this into a conversation about the industry and outside of Panda and get your thoughts. But what industry trends are you seeing at the minute that particularly excite you in surgical robotics?
Well, a clear answer to that, and the one that excites me the most for obvious reasons, is the smallest form factor. We've now seen that in robotic surgery. There's a couple of models that they've been tried and tested, and they're incredibly successful. But when you go to do a direct or somewhat direct version of that model, you're having trouble trying to de-establish what surgeons already like using. So you've seen these new players that will now come with smaller form factors, with smarter tools, AI enabled, but I'd say that enabled with any AI or software assistance, this can be done by the legacy players too. So to me, that's not really the changer, and guess unless you have a specific USP that somebody else doesn't. So that smaller form factor, that way to do things smarter, that's incredibly exciting. Also, the new categories of robotic surgery we're seeing recently. This is again it's very interesting to look. You'll have companies that will do things in a shorter amount of time, or the same tele form factor, but for different disciplines, telesurgery, surgery assistance, name it. There's so many, microsurgery. Yeah, it's an exciting time to be in robotic surgery, I think.
So you mentioned telesurgery there. There's lots of different opinions on telesurgery at the moment. I know SS Innovations out of India are the first cleared telesurgical robot. And when we talk about I know. I know Vishwa and Sudhir very well after spending a bit of time in India, and what those guys have built in such a short space of time, and like the passion behind those guys, it's an awesome company. But to dive into the telesurgery side of it, like some people think it's maybe hype. Some people say that it's, and I'm going to quote Vishwa actually because he has a great opinion on it. He said, "We're not building telesurgery to have the omnipresent God mega surgeon. We're building it so that we can bring training and bring the best surgeons into all of the cases." So what are your thoughts on telesurgery? It's an exciting field on the surface, but do you see it as something that is actually really useful?
This is a debate. I don't have too strong opinions on this, but I do like the concept. I think some of the preconceptions were made based on the pre-existing systems that can be very expensive, and not too many hospitals can afford them, or at least many of them. I think what SSI has done, they have a much cheaper proposition. So I wouldn't be too quick to dismiss how important telesurgery can be if the economics make sense. And to me, it's never a matter of compiling all the surgeries under the one surgeon. Is that you need to build an ecosystem around telesurgery. So I would also be, I would have my doubts if it was a different company doing it. As you said, SSI, they've been moving incredibly fast, which shows strong capability and conviction. So I think we should wait to see what their plan is, how they would like to incorporate the system. There's obviously other telesurgery companies too. And as a concept, it comes with its dangers, but I can clearly see the benefits. So it's, again, I wouldn't be surprised if it never picked up. I wouldn't be surprised if it was incredibly popular. And me, myself, I would tend for the latter. I do want this concept to succeed because in the end, we are still talking about patient outcomes, and I do think telesurgery could improve it.
Amazing. And so some of those other areas that you talked about, microsurgery being one, but what other areas of robotic surgery where it's going into new spaces and pioneering new spaces are you particularly excited about?
Microsurgery for sure. And to me, it's silly how it took this long to pick up robotic microsurgery. I know there were some players back in the day. I think it makes perfect sense. It is a very, very delicate, very difficult surgery. So having that extra precision by a teleop makes a lot of sense. And a teleop makes sense in micro because you have this bigger open space, whereas in endoscopy and neurosurgery, a micro robot is essentially deemed very, very difficult to use. I'm also very, very excited with what Moon Surgical does. Moon is an example of what they clearly studied the market, they identified what's missing, and they went and built it. So it's not a me too, it's not a lookalike, it's a new way to do surgery. And I would like to believe that this is exactly what we're trying to introduce as well, a new way to do surgery rather than jumping on top of what's already existing.
Cool. And so microsurgery as well, so some of the work that MMI is doing, they have published some study on neurosurgery as well. So how does that, obviously it's a different approach to neurosurgery, but how does that research that they're doing compare to, I guess, what you guys are doing? And can they really touch on your space? And I guess the approach is how might they differ in the way that things are going?
I think we have two very, very distinct models in what they do and what we do. They are, again, aiming for open spaces. Microsurgery is essentially open surgery. And I think it's very important to have robotic assistance in that space. I personally don't believe that the MMI robot could play a role in endoscopic spaces, and it's exactly because of that lack of triangulation, that the access pathway in minimally invasive neurosurgery is very, very different to what you would have in micro. You can think of the pathway of it's essentially a cylinder. And sometimes, say endoscopic spine or ETV, it's a literal cylinder, it's the endoscope. So you can't fit a micro robot through there. And you need that triangulation with a micro robot that you can only have, in my opinion, with a handheld device. And even if you could, we go back into that operative workflow management we discussed, where our robots you can just pick up and leave on the table. So you don't disrupt the workflow. And we saw that this was one of the major lessons learned during our animal lab. By the end of the first animal, the neurosurgeons were using our tools pretty much like every other tool. They were like, give me the standard dissector, give me the robotic dissector. And that was it. So that was our operative setup. We don't have to have a specific room for it. And I do think that disrupting the operative workflow is justified in microsurgery. In minimally invasive neurosurgery, I think there's better ways to do it.
Sure. Okay. And so we're going to start to wrap this up now, but I'd like to get your advice. So I'm sure there's lots of people, well, there is lots of people listening to this that are in the academia world right now and probably thinking about spinning that work out into a company at the moment. So have you got any advice for first-time entrepreneurs or first-time people who are looking to set up a company, and what would that be?
Well, I myself, I've been in the game for like 3 years now, so take that with a grain of salt. I think that if you want to get to the space, you should. It's incredibly rewarding. It's very interesting. The things you learn in a year, it will take you a lifetime to learn in other disciplines. So I am very supportive, and I try to speak with anyone that reaches out, wanting to do what I've done. I'm very happy to discuss. I think, though, that we also need to be very pragmatic and realistic about it, in the sense of your PhD is your whole thing. Like when you do a PhD, that's your life for 3-5 years, 7 in the US sometimes. So it's easy to start being very, very constrained into your way of thinking that this will change the world. When we're talking about industrialization, commercialization, you have to take a step back and see, while this is a great novel proposition, does it make economic sense? So my advice every time to anyone that wants to spin out is look into the commercial viability of what you do. And if your market's small, try to think, where else can this solution take effect? Because the moment you spin out and the moment you speak with investors, they will nail you down on the fact, how big is your market? How can we make the investment back? So this is something that wasn't too clear to me when starting out, and I would have appreciated such advice. Then on the other hand, it's long hours, difficult process, but I think that through the PhD, you're very used to this sort of lifestyle. So it's mostly you will need to really believe in what you do, but you also need to build a skill set to make other people believe in what you do.
Amazing, amazing. And what is the thing you want to leave the listener with about Panda Surgical and what you guys are doing?
This is something that I should probably have prepared for, but I think I really want to iterate that we have identified a very real clinical problem, and we believe we have the best solution for it. So to neurosurgeons listening, I would love to connect, and I would love to have them try our devices, as we've already done with tons of experienced people. Anyone can reach out to me and have a chat. I'm very open to interactions, and especially speaking with other entrepreneurs. And generally, we really want to help patients, and this is what I have found in the field, that this is what we share between different startups, legacy, bigger companies, that everyone's really focused on improving that patient outcome. And I think that's wonderful, and I think this is what we should all strive for.
Amazing. Well, Manios, thank you so much for joining me. I've had so much fun on this, so yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been very, very fun, and good luck with the new setup.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of MedTech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.